Hi, I'm Chuck Wolf, and I have the opportunity to present to you a few clients that I've had the wonderful opportunity to work with, and I'll be introducing them in a moment. But I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this session this morning. The idea of emotional intelligence is out there, and a lot of people have heard about it, learned a little bit about it, but mostly it seems people think of it as a theory, an academic theory, or it simply means about being nicer to people, which of course in part it does. But it's also much more than that. And the idea of using emotional intelligence to make your life better, whether it's at home or at work, in your community somehow, it's incredibly powerful. And I think the science and the art of emotional intelligence is something that everybody should be learning more about as much as you can, really. And I want to demonstrate that by having you listen to the people that have just gone through an experience with me over several months, where we've learned about our emotional abilities. So in a moment, as I said, I'd like to introduce you to Lois and to Tamara and to Robert, and each of them run their own businesses, but I'll say just a little bit about all of them. Lois, I had the chance to meet when I got to be a visiting professor for Dan Goleman. As many of you who know something about emotional intelligence have heard Dan's name. Dan's probably the most well-known author in the field, and Dan recently created a coaching program, and Lois was one of the first people to go through it. And I had the good fortune of being a colleague of Dan's and friendly with Dan, and I had the chance to go down and introduce the knowledge and the experience of teaching people how to use the emotion roadmap. And Lois is an interesting person to work with, in part because she went through Dan's entire program and then came on and worked with me on the emotion roadmap with a much deeper dive. And so this is a chance to listen about how I think what I've created is a useful tool for actually working with your emotions, to manage them more effectively, and to be able to influence others. So while a lot of programs that you might attend will teach you about your abilities in some ways, they don't necessarily teach you what to do different. And the emotion roadmap gives you a technique, methodology to do something different. And then Tamara I met in a very interesting circumstance, because through LinkedIn, as many of you probably have experienced, you find connections, and sometimes those connections materialize into actual work. And Kathy, a Vistage consultant who has worked with Tamara and her brother, was looking for someone to help with their business, a leadership coach who also had family systems training. And years ago, I used to be a family therapist. And so it was interesting to come in and meet James and Tamara and find that, yes, the skill set I have does seem to lend itself to the kinds of circumstances that they were facing. And so I've been working with Tamara in multiple ways. And in part, she went through this experience of learning about this MSCEIT, the Meyers Caruso Emotional Intelligence Test that measures abilities. And then also, as a coach, I've been working with Tamara as well. And Robert, I got to know because of his dad. Don Weintraub has been a friend of mine for a lot of years. We hadn't been in touch for a while, but again, I saw something that Don was doing, and I wrote him in LinkedIn that prompted me to think, hey, I ought to drop Don a note. And in talking with Don, we began talking not only about our own lives, but about our children's lives. And Robert is Don's son, and Robert's doing some really interesting things with people on the spectrum, if you will, and he can tell you more about that. But I thought, well, people on the spectrum often have a tremendous amount of difficulty with emotions, managing their own emotions and interacting with others. And I thought it might be interesting to talk to him just about the work that I'm doing and whether it might lend itself to that. And so in talking with Robert, we connected and seemed like a really good connection. And then since that moment, we've done some work together, and hopefully some of those things are helping Robert's clientele as well as Robert. And so that's it. So I'm going to now turn this over to Lois as the first person I met to talk a little bit about herself, a little bit about what she learned. Then it'll be followed by Tamara, then by Robert, and then just a little conversation amongst ourselves. So I hope you find this useful and practical and helpful in understanding how emotional intelligence can help you, as well as how it's helping the people that I've been working with. So Lois, you're up.
All right. Thank you for having us today, Chuck. And it is a pleasure to get to talk about my experience and tell you a little bit about me. So I think you mentioned earlier about being a business owner. I own 3 different businesses, of which I'm all president of all 3. And one of them is a original equipment manufacturer distributor. And then the other one is a service company. We're a water treatment company. So we're taking care of your water and safeguarding your water. And then the third business is a coaching business. So I do executive coaching and help people with their culture. So that's a little bit about my professional side. And then, as Chuck had mentioned about the Daniel Goleman program where we got to meet, what I enjoyed about that program was I got to learn a lot about the different emotions, but I didn't necessarily get to learn how to do with what I learned about them. So going through this program with Chuck has given me a tool, a methodology, a process to be able to say, identify how I'm feeling, and if it is ideal or if it's not ideal, what would be ideal and how can I get there. It's also helped me suspend judgment of other people, because I used to believe that I would think people would be able to know when they're feeling a certain way or getting triggered because I could see it in them. But I realize now by going through this program that not everyone has that ability to sense how they're feeling and how they're coming across. So it's been a real eye-opener for me to examine the way I look at other individuals as they're processing their emotions.
So the emotion roadmap, this is this idea that sometimes the emotions we're feeling are not helpful. I mean, they're informative. They're always informative. Whatever we're feeling is usually designed to help protect us. And really, it's an evolutionary system. It's been out there forever. But at the same time, sometimes whatever we're feeling, like if we're angry, but we can't be angry in a certain situation, we just can't afford to be angry, what do we do about it? And if we're grieving, but grieving too long, and it's gone on past the time that might be considered normal, and we can't seem to get out of it, how do we change that? And so the idea of the roadmap was, if you're feeling a certain way and it's not helpful, ask yourself the question of what is ideal. Can you think of any, I know you've had a few instances, Lois, where is there a circumstance or situation where you actually saw that concept work with a client or in a business setting that you might run or as a coach? Anything you can share?
Yeah, sure. I've got one in particular that comes to mind. I've used it a lot. She's my assistant for now. But I was working with a client who was struggling with having a conversation with a direct report. And I just started talking about the model and asked her, how do you feel about this? And she was, just very fearful of having it, afraid of the confrontation, afraid of how the other individual was going to respond. And so I went through the model and asked her, well, ideally, how would you like to feel? And so she said, well, I want to feel confident in a conversation, and I want to feel good when I'm having a conversation. So I asked her, ideally, how would you like this other individual to feel when they walk away? And she goes, well, I want them to feel understood. I want them to feel valued, and a number of other things. And so then I asked her, what are some of the things that you could do that will allow you to feel that way? And then what we did was we kind of went through some hypothetical conversations, put yourself in this other individual's shoes. If you were them and you wanted to feel valued, what kind of words would you be using? And we went through that whole process, and she sent me an email a couple days later and said, I don't know what I was afraid of. She said, the model helped me. It was the best conversation I'd ever had. No need to reply, but I just want to let you know how wonderful that was. And again, she was like, I don't even know why I was afraid to have the conversation. And it has also allowed her now, she knows that enough, a little bit of it, that she's helped herself have other conversations by using that model.
So that's great. So to me, sometimes it feels like magic happens because people feel like it's impossible. I can't really figure out how to have this conversation. And then simply by walking them through, how are you feeling? How is the other key person and whatever you're trying to get done feeling? What would you like to feel? What would be great to feel, ideal to feel? And then trying to come up with strategies to get there. And then when they do it, it often sounds the way you just described, Lois, like what was I afraid of? Well, because the model walked you through it, you didn't need to be afraid anymore. And that, right. Thank you, that's great. Okay, why don't we go to you, Tamara?
Sure. So I am a third generation owner of a family business. My brother and I are business partners. We have several businesses that sit here together. So we call them the operating companies and then all of our real estate entities. And 4.5 years ago, my brother and I purchased the companies from our dad and cousin. And with transition from one generation to the next, there can be change, there can be lots of emotions, lots of feelings that come up within the family and also with the people that help move the businesses along every day. And so one of the things that I was excited to work with Chuck on and learn about this model for was to be able to have some of those conversations with staff and family members in this building and outside of this building in a more productive way. Obviously, like Chuck said, emotions are with us all the time. We're always feeling something, even if we're not actively listening to what we're feeling. And so being more aware of that, and then also being more aware of how those emotions might show up in different conversations and how we can actually work through them in ourselves, and then how we can also then influence those in others, you know, like Lois was alluding to, you know, how might that other person might be feeling going into a conversation where it might not be super easy things to talk about. And how do you want that person to feel? How do you want them feeling while you're talking with them? And then how do you want that person to leave that conversation? I think are all really important pieces of, especially what we do as business owners, but just humans in general. I think it's important to be aware of that as you're walking through life. I've used this, like I said, with my family. I've used this with my children, with my husband, with my parents, along with all of my direct reports and even frontline workers here in all of our other companies. So I've really found this model to be useful. And as I continue to use it more, I continue to get better with it and even coach it to others here so they can start using it with their direct reports also.
And so the idea, I think, is that it's really something once you learn it, and my goal and really in teaching about it at this point in my life is that I want as many people as possible to learn how to do this. Because to me, one of the things that you begin to feel is you feel like you can take more control over your life, is that you are able to manage your own emotions, and that leads to more inner peace. And I think if you have more inner peace, less questions in your own head about life, and more understanding and recognition of life isn't perfect, but it's sort of how you deal with the ups and downs that really translate into whether or not you're going to be effective in getting through life in a beneficial way where you can be helpful to yourself and to others. And so I think you're kind of like, the more you can teach it, the more others are going to learn it. And hopefully, as we expand this knowledge across the planet, it leads to world peace. That's my major goal, actually. Any specific examples, Tamara, that you can think of someplace in the workplace or someplace at home, either one, but something where you can get, something concrete that people might benefit from knowing actually how it worked?
Sure. My husband is a middle school assistant principal, and his group is going through learning about fierce conversations. And so it's been an interesting time in our house while he's learning about that and I'm learning about this. And we were having some conversations about what had come from one of his seminar sessions. And there was I don't know if there's a miscommunication or a misunderstanding that had happened in a breakout group. And he brought up, how he was feeling about it. And I said to him, well, is that a helpful feeling to have while you're sitting through these courses that your district is asking you to learn? And, he kind of stepped back. I obviously wasn't super happy that I asked him that, but then kind of stepped back and said, well, no, if I'm sitting here, thinking about this, or stewing, I think was the word he used, about this, then I'm not open and actively listening to the next piece, that had already been moved on to. And I said, okay, well, how, in that situation when something like that comes up, how would you want to feel about that? And he said, I would love to be able to acknowledge that maybe that's not the way I would have had that conversation to begin with, but accept that, okay, this has happened. I can set this aside. I can come back to it later if I'm still feeling the way I'm feeling about it. But I'd like to try to feel more calm and more focused on what I'm really sitting there for, and not allow myself, we would call that triggered or spinning sometimes. And so not allow myself to get triggered or start spinning in that instance. And I said, great, how do you think that would be something that you could do, when you get in that situation again, or if that comes up in, tomorrow's session, how do you think you could change your focus? And he just talked about, really kind of creating a mantra, if you will, of, this is information that I need to be learning. This is going to be helpful when kids come back in the building, or staff comes back in the building. And so this is really information that will be helpful to me. I need to stay focused. So staying focused was something that he was trying to create for himself, for her mantra, to really not allow himself to start kind of going down a road that wouldn't be helpful for him or anybody else in the session. We didn't quite get to that end piece of how do you want that other person to feel. But I think, it helped him in that regard of taking a step back and understanding, like, well, yeah, everybody gets angry or, worked up about things at times, but is that helpful? And how can I change my perspective, still understanding that that's not going to be something that makes me happy. That's going to be something that I'm, I don't like. But I can change my perspective to continue moving on and being productive and effective in what you're doing in the moment, instead of getting caught up in something and then really losing the opportunity for growth and learning.
So it seems to me, one of the things that I try to teach is that certain events trigger you. Now, this is not, I don't know how often something like that happens, but if your husband can get triggered and then lose focus of what he needs to be paying attention to, then I think the script needs to be a bit different in terms of what your self-talk's about. That's one of the things that I try to teach, is that, the next time, if you know that there's certain events that trigger you, and then the trigger shows up in your head as certain words that drive certain feelings, can you change the script? Can you change what you say to yourself the next time it comes up? And can you actually prepare a script that you want to just repeat to yourself about, when this happens, I have to remember that, yes, I'm unhappy about the circumstance, about what I just heard about, but I don't need to think about that now. I may want to write it down so I come back to it later, but the reason I'm in the room is to learn about this other information, and I'm distracted and not learning about this, so that's not healthy for me. If I want to talk to the other person about the situation that I thought was problematic, I need to set that aside and do that outside of the class that I'm learning. I mean, it could be anything. It could be something at home with, where do we have triggers? Well, we have them with our siblings. We have them with our spouses, our partners, our business partners, with certain people at work, with certain things that just happen almost on automatic, like when somebody taps your knee. It's a reflexive action. But you can change the reflex by, if it's something that goes off in your head and certain words and thoughts appear, change them. Consciously decide to change them. But the whole idea of this emotion roadmap is that you can be proactive. I have a radio show that I do. It says, the emotion roadmap, take the wheel and control how you feel. Many people think you have to deal with the feelings that you have. It's kind of like you got to play the cards you were dealt. Well, it's true in some instances. If you've lost someone, you're going to grieve. There's no way of getting around that. But in other instances, they're more malleable. It's more possible that you can actually change how you're feeling when what you're feeling isn't helpful. And then you have choices. What do you want to feel instead? Well, why not pick what's ideal to feel and go for that and try to figure out how to get there. Oh, great. Thanks, Tamara. And Robert, you're up.
Sure. My name is Robert Weintraub. I am the head of business development and client relations for a company called Your Work in Progress. That organization does a combination of executive and senior sales recruiting, along with sales effectiveness, change management consulting, and also a lot of career coaching and associated collateral elements. As well, I have an organization called Neurodiverse Solutions, which specifically caters to adults on the autism spectrum who need both career and life solutions in a place, in a setting where they're often underserved. This experience for me, it's kind of multifaceted, but it came at a time in my life where I really didn't recognize just how much help on a personal and a professional level I might have needed. One gets caught up in this day and age, kind of the quote unquote post-COVID now era that's being spoken about, and everything that's associated with it has had a huge impact on everyone, and certainly me myself. This experience has not only allowed me to meet some wonderful, successful people like Tamara, Lois, and Chuck. I've been able to get beyond some of my own narcissism, some of my own delusions of grandeur, to be quite honest, to realize a bit more about who and what I am and how meaningful that could then be to other people, especially those who I work with on the spectrum, who are in a lot of ways very similar to me and just need that added edge and that attaboy or a girl to get where they want to go. So for me, this has been just a fantastic opportunity to get a bit more self-understanding, to learn from others, and to be able to not only apply it in the workplace, but also in my own personal life as well.
Thanks, Robert. Do you have something again, another specific example of something that may have happened in the workplace that you could share, and with either of the companies or any of the people?
Yeah, sure. Considering the fact, well, there's a couple of very quick things. It's been life impacting because Your Work in Progress is a founder-run organization. The two founders happen to be my father and myself. So just being able to have the conversation about this experience with him has been a bit of a game changer as far as trying to move a company forward, but also where the applications can be substantive for our clients. That's been meaningful. But I think in some ways, even more importantly, with what I would consider to be my passion project, Neurodiverse Solutions, I've been able to work with what I would call my primary candidate, albeit they're all great, a gentleman named Robert Halenda. And being able to go through this experience and once a week, if not more, share not only what we've spoke about, what I've been able to learn, but how it could impact his life, how it can potentially apply directly to his career, what he aspires to be moving forward. And it's been impactful, meaningful. And for a person, and my client, Robert, would not have an issue with me saying this, for a person who struggles with his own emotions, but really more his ability to articulate them, kind of going through this experience through me by proxy has been one of the most meaningful situations, things that he's ever gone through in his life. So it's just been great across the board, and I'm thankful.
It's so nice because one of the things that I really value is to try to make a meaningful, positive difference in people's lives if I can. And in each of you in your own ways are trying to do that. And it's really beneficial and fantastic for me personally, just to hear that people, not just the people that I'm talking to, but people who you are communicating with also are getting the benefit of what you've been learning, because you're now beginning to teach it as well. And the fact that, Robert's as a proxy for you, Robert, that he's, again, there's a whole world out there that has these kind of similar concerns or issues that they deal with every day. And if the roadmap can work in all kinds of possibilities, there's no reason why I can't work with everyone in every circumstance. And the more people and the more people that understand this, I think, again, the better the world's going to be, because all of us can benefit from tools that help us to manage our own internal experiences of emotion, as well as what we learn about trying to influencing others. I just open it up for any other comments, just in closing, any other thoughts any of you might want to share in closing? Robert, you're on mute.
My apology. I kind of anticipated again that going over a multi-month period of time and sharing these experiences would be productive and cathartic. It would be somewhat special to me. Through kind of a combination of business and professional things, I don't think that I ever knew how meaningful it might be. And it's not just the information that one learns that's on paper, which is fantastic and life-changing. It's this experience, this personal / professional experience that we've all been able to go through, that's meant so very much to me. And again, not to be redundant, but I'm just terribly appreciative, incredibly appreciative for having had this opportunity.
Thanks very much, Robert. Anything else? Anybody?
I would echo Robert. I think the experience over multiple weeks of meeting and having coursework, if you will, or actual lessons to go through, but then all of the extra that comes along with it, right? The really being able to walk away from a session with this group of people and put it to use is, it's amazing. And that's where you see it really come to life. And I think by continuing to do work with groups like this, you're well on your way of, having peace on earth. Because the more, if you look at just each one of us going to one other person, right, and talking to them or teaching them about this, which it's more than one for each of us, that's an incredible impact. And who wouldn't want to be able to understand how to take control of what's going on inside when you're dealing with people, since that's what everybody does every day, no matter what your line of work or where you live. That's what you do when you're here.
Thanks, Tamara. How about you, Lois? You want to close it out?
Yeah, I'd also like to echo on what they've just shared as well. I mean, the whole experience, given the amount of time that we've been meeting, it's been several months, and we've been able to be very vulnerable and share as a group. When we first came together, we were complete strangers. We had the one common denominator of Chuck, and it's more than just like reading what the content is, but then you get to actually go and take it out and apply it, and then come back and share, and you learn more from that. And it's been a game changer for me. I've been using it with my grandkids. They're little, and they'll, how are you feeling right now? And how would you like to feel? How do you think your sister feels right now? How would you like your sister to feel? And it really helps them stop and think about their own behavior and whatever is driving their little body. And sometimes they're like, I don't know how I feel, so I think introducing it to at a very young age and having that language and just talking about it, because for me, and I don't know about the rest of you, it's not something we were necessarily taught, like, to pay attention to. We go to school and we have our curriculum, everything we learn there, reading and math and history, but we haven't really had a platform to help us learn about, our emotions, which really is, to me, like a barometer telling you something that's going on in your world. So it's definitely been a game changer, and I would highly recommend it to anyone.
Okay, well, it's been great, folks. Thank you very much for participating. And I hope everybody that gets to see this realizes that this is simply to get you to understand how powerful this can be. Whether you learn it from about the emotion roadmap or other tools or techniques you can learn about managing your own emotions and how to constructively influence other people. Those are powerful tools, and they're out there, and we're learning more each day. So I encourage all of you, and while it's great to learn it young, it's not too late to learn it no matter what age you're starting from. It's always better to think about, well, I wish I'd done this in the past. You didn't, but you have the opportunity to do it in the future, in the present. So take advantage of whatever you can, wherever you can, and learn whatever you can about managing emotions. So thanks everybody for being part of this. I really appreciate it, and I plan on revisiting with each of you again, hopefully soon. Okay, I'm gonna stop the recording now. Thanks.